add them all together, Lennon would sit there with a record that you could go, fucking hell. I mean, that blows Smith out the water. That blows this manager out the water, because they never won 7 trophies, 8 trophies in a row. They never done treble after treble and Champions League after Champions League. And Neil Lennon could have had that honour, you know. And I just, I mean, I'm being greedy now. I know I'm being greedy by saying, well, why aren't we doing that? And why aren't we doing more when we've got all this? But, you know, Jock Stein was able to do it, cup after cup, Europe after Europe, you know. And if we're doing the things the Celtic way, then the board has got to step up to the plate, has got to back the fans, has got to make a case against the Mankey mob, has got to pay its own wages. The chief executive's got to take a haircut and a fucking huge wage cut and give away that Crombie suit and stop walking about like fucking Don Curly Wurley outside Kerrydale Street, because I've seen him. I've got the pictures there of him walking about like fucking Don Curly Wurley, you know, outside Celtic Park. He needs a wage cut. We need some life and new vigour back at Celtic Park. I'm putting a vote out, get the G-Man all the way from the Philly Provo, all the way from Virginia, and you're in at the head of Kerrydale Street. When are you coming over here anyway, G-Man?
Next month, actually, I'm coming over for the Aberdeen game and the AC Milan game, and in the middle, we're going to have Paul Arkin's Edinburgh book launch for the Asterisk years, where, you know, this book is, I mean, it blows the lid off of David Murray's brain. Yeah, 3 times. 3 times, yeah.
3 times?
Yeah.
G-Man, right, nobody's listening, right? And we're fucking 5 in the morning, right? And nobody's listening to my show. I mean, I get 2 listeners to every 200 you get, right? So just fucking spill the beans now, right? Just hit me with everything. Tell me all the juicy stuff, because I can't wait. Tell me something fecky juicy to know. And Paul, God willing, Paul, he'll no hear it, he'll no hear about it. If he does, then salt and vinegar always wins against salt and sauce. So I'll prevail in any argument. Don't you worry. I'll back you up to the max, G-Man. And when he comes over, then if he's not going to put you up at his house, you can come to my house and we'll put you up here. So don't worry. Just spill everything. Fucking hit me with everything, G-Man. Come on. Don't hold back. I'll take the dairy for it. Tell me something. Give me a juicy bit. Come on.
Listen, here it is.
Give me something. Give me something.
All right. Listen, I'm going to tell you. I'm going to tell you exactly what this book lays out, why it's important, why it's significant, and what he's done that nobody else has done. You know, and what would have been so easy, not just to do in retrospect, but to do, you know, while it was happening. You know, in the process, if there wasn't such a biased media, if the media wasn't paid off. But essentially, Paul Arkin explains in this book, step by step, David Murray's reign over Rangers, what he set out to do, what his goals were, what he lined up to make this happen. You know, so what Paul does is he exposes the fact that David Murray just built up a house of cards, and a shaky one at that. That was, fortified on a bed of sand. I mean, you know, it was on the shakiest of foundations. He laid out the fact that David Murray didn't have a stack of cash. He wasn't, you know, this multi-billionaire, Great Gatsby, Richie Rich type. It wasn't David Murray's money that got Rangers to where they were and, you know, had all of that favor. It was David Murray's influence. And the influence that he had was built up through his connections. Connections with, every influential institution in Scotland. And that's not hyperbole. Every single one. You know, most notably, Royal Bank of Scotland, who, you know, let's not forget, due to the fact that there was a £9 million debt at Celtic, they nearly shut the club down. $9 million. Almost saw us go to the wall. At the same time, They were bankrolling David Murray. I mean, to the end. They were bankrolling his entire fortune. David Murray never possessed any money. It was all financed. He borrowed everything. So essentially, he played both ends of the spectrum. Royal Bank of Scotland had every interest in bankrolling David Murray, because they lent him all that money. Well, they want to protect their investment, so what do? They have to knock out their closest competitor, Celtic. They saw to it that this was going to happen.
You're saying the Royal Bank, it was not the Bank of Scotland, G?
Yeah. It was our BOS.
It was a BOS, it was Bank of Scotland, was it not?
I'd have to go back and look. I mean, but my understanding was it was Royal Bank of Scotland.
It was the Bank of Scotland that tried to take out Celtic. It was the Bank of Scotland, I'm sure.
Yeah.
And that was the one where David Masterton. I mean, does it? What do you call it? That Gavin Masterton.
Yeah.
Does it talk about the? What I was looking for was the relationship between the bankers and the Edinburgh establishment part. I mean,
he has all of that. He has all of it. He names names, some of the most powerful people in Scotland, and he calls them corrupt. It's an incredibly courageous book. He lays out exactly who they are. He names names. He details very specifically their role in all of this, and not just Rangers. I mean, David Murray, all of his dealings, generally, what he intended to do with developing Greenbelt.
Gee, stay there. I'll phone you back. Hold on, stay there. You managed to get 47 minutes, but the line just distorting. This is just wonderful stuff. Stay there. You can't whack stuff like this. We're going. This is hardcore. This is nearly 5 in the morning. 5 in the morning. What's Rocky? What's happened to Rocky?
Tommy.
We've lost Rocky. Rocky's a casualty to the crackpot FM, but never mind. We're talking the Edinburgh establishment now.
Yeah. So he lists every principle that was involved in all of this, what their relationship was to David Murray, exactly how he lined them up so that everybody was in lockstep. Everybody was marching to the same tune. And the tune was give Rangers every possible advantage in terms of making things anti-competitive within Scotland and ending Celtic, making sure that Celtic went to the wall.
Yeah, because if you look at the same time when Murray was leading his steel empire, he had Gavin Masterton, right? Well, he was head up in the Bank of Scotland, Masterton, and then that bastard there, Greer, right? So Greer, I mean, the whole stitch up of what has happened recently with Greer and White. White was brought in by Greer. Greer worked at the Bank of Scotland. Masterton, at the same time as him having a company called Stadia that ranked up £25 million worth of debts, went bankrupt, awful similar to the same trick that Murray carried out at Rangers. But what you had was Masterton with his Stadia company, Murray with the steel, yeah.
Masterton was small potatoes in this.
But his company, right? If you look, his company with Dunfermline, the team that liked to lay down after we came back from Seville. So you had Masterton's Dunfermline. You had him making so much money from his company, but what happened was forcing all the other Scottish teams to have all-seated stadia. So they got their cronies in the SFA to bring this law in, that all-seated stadia was a must. So then Murray benefited because his steel built the stadiums. Masterton benefited because his stadium company built all the stadium. He went into debts of 25 million. Murray's steel empire, with every other business attached to it, has disappeared with over 600 or 700 million. And yet these bastards are still walking about, are still lording the manor, yet they've crashed it. I I mean, they've crashed the whole Scottish economy. They've crashed the whole of Scottish football almost. And yet, why are they not in a dock and facing criminal proceedings and going to jail for the amount of money that they've basically stolen?
Well, and that gets down to the root question of why aren't any of the creators of this global economic meltdown, this financial Armageddon that has been in play for the past 5 years, why are any of these masters of the universe, so-called, why aren't any of them locked up? Why aren't any of the people from Goldman Sachs in New York who architected all of this, why aren't they locked up? And it's I don't have a good answer for that. It's the $1 million question, at this point. Maybe Peter Lawwell can answer it. But in terms of Gavin Masterton followed orders. David Murray told him what to do, and he executed. That's as simple as that. David Murray had far more powerful people than Masterton at his beck and call. I mean, we're talking about. I mean, it goes to the very top of the power brokers within Scotland. Listen, you gotta read the book to get the specifics on exactly who it was. But I will say, if you're going to talk about somebody like Alex Salmond, that's small potatoes. Far more powerful people than Alex Salmond answered to David Murray. We'll just say that.
And so, are you talking? I mean, out with Scotland, are you talking right to the top? I mean, if you're talking Masterton, who was higher.
This is within Scotland, and this is where the Edinburgh establishment formed a ring around David Murray and essentially Rangers. Now, when everything went tits up for them, I mean, it was no surprise, it was no coincidence that the global economic meltdown coincided with the demise and the nose downward pitch of Rangers happened, because there were two key elements here. Number one, all of the principals that were in charge of the Bank of Scotland prior to 2008 all of a sudden found themselves out of favor and out of power, because what you'll also remember from that meltdown in 2008 was that the Bank of Scotland went out of business. They essentially went bust, and they had to have Lloyd's come in and take over responsibility for the bank and turning it around. Well, when the boys from Lloyd's came in from London, they didn't have any favor, or favors, I guess, that they needed to pay to these power brokers like David Murray, like Angus Grossart, and others. They came in looking for money, and when they looked over the books, they're like, "What the fuck is going on here?" I mean, you have tens of millions of pounds loaned out to this David Murray, not just on Rangers, but on his steel business. When are we ever going to see any of this money? And that's when Lloyd's went in and started appointing, essentially their own administrators. They had their own people that would go in and say, right, here's what you're going to be spending money on. Here's your allowance. Here's what you're allowed. And here's how you're going to start paying us back. And once they tighten the noose tighter and tighter, David Murray didn't have any of that influence anymore, because he didn't have that unending stream of cash that was going to come in. All of the people that had power prior to 2008 all of a sudden didn't have power anymore. And that was the crux of it. That was the beginning of the end. And it was no coincidence that David Murray, at exactly that point, started vigorously and eagerly shopping Rangers, trying to sell it desperately. And obviously we know over the course of those years, those 3 years before he finally sold it for £1 to Craig White, nobody came in and bought it. And he was desperate to get rid of it, because the house of cards was crumbling, built on a pile of sand. And what the thing is, Paul Arkin anybody could have done this if they just had the initiative, the wherewithal, and the audacity. I mean, he got much of his information from going to company's house and looking in their records, which is free for anyone to go and access, let alone a journalist, who has resources, connections, and a bit of wherewithal. Paul Arkin had some very well-connected sources as well that he sourced through this, that pointed him in the right direction, that gave him information, told him where to